This is happening right now in Jerusalem. The ancient stones of the old city shimmered under the morning sun as thousands gathered near the western wall. Something impossible was unfolding before their eyes. The streets went silent. Even reporters had no words. And when I tell you why, you'll understand what's truly unfolding. Rabbi Eliezer ben David stood at his apartment window, overlooking the bustling market of Mahane Yehuda. At 73, his weathered face had witnessed decades of Jerusalem's story. This morning felt different. The air seemed charged with an inexplicable energy that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. "Sarah," he called to his wife of 50 years, "something is happening today. I can feel it in my bones." Sarah looked up from her morning prayers, a knowing look in her eyes. "I've felt it too, Eli, since before dawn. The mainstream media isn't covering this. They don't want you to see what's really happening, but the truth can't stay hidden forever." Rabbi ben David was not alone in his sensing. Across Jerusalem, from the ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods of Mea Shearim to the modern apartments in Rehavia, thousands reported the same feeling. A collective awareness had descended upon the holy city. By mid-morning, the phenomenon had intensified. People left their work and looked up at the sky. The same soil where prophets walked, the same streets that heard the Messiah's footsteps, now bore witness to something extraordinary. Daniel Cohen, a young seminary student, was studying ancient texts at yeshiva when he noticed the strange light reflecting off his scroll. It wasn't sunlight, he would later testify. It was golden, almost liquid in appearance. Outside the Herva synagogue, tourists and locals alike noticed that the birds had stopped singing. The constant background noise of the city, cars, voices, commerce, had dimmed to an eerie quiet. Jerusalem, a city that never truly sleeps, seemed to hold its breath. "I've lived here for 60 years, said an old merchant named Moshe, setting down his wares in the market. "I've waited my entire life for this." A pilgrim from Australia said, "I felt the heavens touch the earth." By noon, word had spread through text messages, calls, and whispers. This wasn't hysteria. This was prophecy in motion. The veil between heaven and earth was getting thinner. Rabbi ben David received an urgent call from the chief rabbinate. 7 of the most respected rabbinical scholars in Israel requested his immediate presence at a private meeting room near the Western Wall. They had been studying the ancient prophetic texts for decades, and something in the collective experience of Jerusalem that morning matched the descriptions in scrolls thousands of years old. "The time has come," the message said simply, as Rabbi ben David made his way through the winding streets of the old city. He noticed people gathering in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. Some were praying, others were simply waiting, eyes turned toward the Temple Mount. What the prophets saw thousands of years ago was unfolding before their eyes. In Isaiah 2 it was written, "In the last days the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it." And in Acts 2, "In the last days," God says, "I will pour out my Spirit on all people." The continuity of prophecy was revealing itself, and Jerusalem stood at its center. When Rabbi ben David arrived at the meeting, he found not only his Jewish colleagues, but also, surprisingly, Christian scholars and Muslim imams. The interfaith gathering was unprecedented in recent history. "We've all felt it," said Rabbi Menachem Lau, his voice steady but filled with awe. "And we've all found references in our texts to what's happening now. My friend, can you feel this in your spirit? Do you realize we are witnessing what generations only dreamed of? This is the preview of the greatest event in human history. Today, something impossible appeared over the Temple Mount. The gathering of religious leaders continued into the afternoon. Outside, the golden light had intensified, creating a dome-like appearance over the entire old city. Thousands had gathered at the Western Wall, along rooftops, and in every available space with a view of the Temple Mount. Inside the private chamber, Rabbi Ben David listened as his colleagues shared interpretations of ancient texts that had puzzled scholars for centuries but now seemed crystal clear. The prophecy in Zechariah speaks of 10 men from nations of every language taking hold of a Jew by the edge of his robe, explained Rabbi Shlomo Amar. It says, "Let us go with you, because we have heard that God is with you." A Christian theologian nodded. And in Revelation, John writes of a great multitude from every nation, tribe, people, and language. An Islamic scholar added, "Even in our tradition, Jerusalem holds special significance as a gathering place before the final days. They don't want you to see what's really happening, but the truth can't stay hidden forever." Outside, the phenomenon intensified. A soft, melodious sound, not thunder, but a voice within the wind, swept through the city. It wasn't in any recognizable language, yet people from different nations reported understanding it in their native tongues. A journalist who had been skeptical began recording with trembling hands. "I came to cover political tensions," she whispered into her camera. "Instead, I'm witnessing something I can't explain." The ancient stones of the old city pulsed with energy. The dome of the rock glowed gold beneath a clear sky. Synagogues, churches, and mosques all stood in silence as their faithful gathered outside, looking up. Rabbi Ben David and the Council of Religious Leaders emerged from their meeting with a unanimous declaration, something unprecedented in the divided history of Jerusalem. "We have witnessed the beginning of what our ancestors foretold," Rabbi Lau announced to the gathered crowd. "For the first time in history, we stand united in recognition of divine signs. You're watching this because God wanted you to see it. Something in your spirit recognizes this moment as different." Cameras from around the world finally began to arrive, though many reported technical difficulties. Live feeds mysteriously cut out. Satellite signals wavered. Yet the message spread through cell phones and personal videos. They heard a sound, not thunder, but a voice within the storm, wrote one observer online. His post shared millions of times within hours. As evening approached, the Rabbinical Council made a second announcement that sent shockwaves through religious communities worldwide. They had unanimously agreed to begin preparation for a ceremony not performed in nearly 2,000 years, a symbolic cornerstone laying for a house of prayer for all nations. But this is not a political statement, Rabbi Ben David clarified to the anxious reporters. This is a spiritual acknowledgement. The prophecy speaks of a time when God's house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. He referenced Isaiah 56. "These I will bring to my holy mountain and give them joy in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted on my altar. For my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations." And from Mark 11, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations'?" The announcement was carefully worded to respect all faiths, with claims to Jerusalem's holiness. The proposed spiritual center would not replace existing structures, but would symbolize a new era of understanding. Dr. Catherine Lewis, a historian from Oxford University who happened to be in Jerusalem researching ancient texts, observed the phenomenon with academic interest that gradually transformed into wonder. "I've studied these prophecies as literature," she confessed to a colleague, "but seeing thousands of people experiencing the same spiritual awareness simultaneously, there's no historical precedent except in the texts themselves." By nightfall, the golden light had formed a pillar reaching into the darkening sky. Stars seemed to pulse in rhythm with the collective heartbeat of the city below. God is moving the pieces of the end times. While the world sleeps, God is calling those who are awake. Now that you know this, what will you do about it? Jerusalem stopped this morning for a reason no one can explain. By dawn of the second day, flights to Israel had filled to capacity. People from nations worldwide felt inexplicably drawn to Jerusalem. Airlines added extra routes to accommodate the sudden demand. The Ben Gurion Airport became a mosaic of humanity. Business people abandoning meetings, families arriving with minimal preparation, religious and non-religious alike responding to a call they couldn't articulate. "I don't know why I'm here," said James Chen, a software engineer from Singapore who had purchased a one-way ticket on impulse. "I just knew I had to come." Thousands ran, not from fear, but because something was calling them. The roads to Jerusalem clogged with vehicles. Many abandoned their cars miles away and continued on foot, creating pilgrim paths reminiscent of ancient times. The same soil where prophets walked now felt the footsteps of a global gathering, an ingathering that the prophets themselves had foreseen. In Joel 2, it was written, "Blow the trumpet in Zion, call a sacred assembly." And in Revelation 7, "After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb." Rabbi Ben David and the Interfaith Council worked tirelessly to accommodate the influx. Hotels were at capacity, residents opened their homes to strangers. The municipality established tent cities in parks and open spaces. Despite the crowding, witnesses reported an unusual atmosphere of peace and cooperation. "I've never seen Jerusalem like this," said Fatima Nazari, a local shopkeeper. "That no tension, no suspicion, just people helping one another." The golden light remained, now forming patterns that scholars recognized from ancient manuscripts, symbols common to multiple faith traditions that had been interpreted separately for centuries. Dr. Lewis, the Oxford historian, joined the Rabbinical Council as a consultant. These symbols appear in Dead Sea Scrolls, early Christian codices, and Islamic astronomical texts, she explained. "They've always been there, waiting for us to see them together rather than apart." The mainstream media finally arrived in force but struggled to categorize what was happening. Was it a religious event, a mass psychological phenomenon, a natural occurrence with scientific explanation? Their confusion was evident in contradictory headlines and bewildered on-air reporters. "And I'm standing in Jerusalem," began one network correspondent, "where thousands have gathered for—" She paused, at a loss for words, for something that defies description. Rabbi Ben David addressed the growing crowd from a simple platform near the Jaffa Gate. No amplification was needed. The same acoustic miracle that carried the mysterious voice now carried his words to every ear, regardless of distance. "Be friends, brothers, sisters, from every nation and faith," he began, his voice steady despite his awe. "We stand at a threshold foretold by our ancestors. This is not the end, but a beginning, not a conclusion, but an invitation. My friend, can you feel this in your spirit? The veil between heaven and earth is getting thinner." As he spoke, the Interfaith Council revealed their plan for the symbolic cornerstone, a simple ceremony that would acknowledge prophetic traditions while carefully respecting political sensitivities. The stone itself would be placed in a neutral location, representing intention rather than construction. "This cornerstone represents our shared recognition that something profound is occurring," explained Rabbi Lau. "It carries no political claim, but acknowledges a spiritual reality that transcends our divisions." The announcement triggered both celebration and concern. Political leaders called emergency meetings. Security forces mobilized, though they reported no signs of unrest. The unprecedented peace that blanketed Jerusalem defied historical patterns. By evening, the gathering had swelled further. Aerial photographs showed the city surrounded by camps stretching into the Judean hills. Modern technology enabled the event to be witnessed globally, though those present reported that screens could not capture the full sensory experience. "There's a fragrance here," described Maria Gonzalez, a teacher from Mexico. "Like rain on dry earth, like bread baking, like something remembered rather than encountered." Scientists from various disciplines arrived to document the phenomenon. Their instruments detected unusual electromagnetic patterns, atmospheric anomalies, and what one physicist described as coherence patterns in quantum fields surrounding the city. Their preliminary findings, rather than diminishing the spiritual interpretation, seemed to enhance it, as if science were providing additional vocabulary for what the ancient texts had described through metaphor. Dr. Lewis discovered additional textual connections as scholars from different traditions shared their knowledge openly. "We're finding that prophecies we thought were separate are actually interconnected," she reported, like pieces of a puzzle finally brought together. As night fell on the second day, the golden light transformed into thousands of smaller lights that moved through the crowds, touching individuals of all backgrounds. Those who experienced this touch described a profound sense of peace and clarity. Rabbi Ben David, watching from a rooftop, turned to Sarah, who had joined him. "It's happening, just as it was written," he whispered, not with fear and destruction, but with wonder and unity. "The wolf and the lamb shall feed together," she quoted from Isaiah 65. He nodded, completing the verse, "They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain." Do you realize we are witnessing what generations only dreamed of? This is the preview of the greatest event in human history. While the world sleeps, God is calling those who are awake. The streets went silent as the cornerstone was revealed. Dawn of the third day broke with a symphony of light. The pillar above Jerusalem had transformed into a spiral of golden radiance that seemed to connect earth and sky. Scholars from multiple traditions recognized the pattern as a sacred geometry described in their ancient texts, a divine blueprint. The Interfaith Council had worked through the night, finalizing plans for the cornerstone ceremony. The stone itself was simple, Jerusalem limestone, uncarved by human hands, discovered in an archaeological excavation years earlier, but never classified. Carbon dating placed its quarrying at approximately the 1st century. "This stone has witnessed the full history of our divisions," Rabbi Ben David explained to the gathered representatives. "Now it will witness our recognition of shared destiny." The location chosen for the ceremony was the archaeological garden near the southern wall, a neutral space with historical significance to all three Abrahamic faiths. Israeli authorities, after tense deliberations, granted special permission for the event while emphasizing its symbolic rather than structural nature. What the prophets saw thousands of years ago is unfolding before our eyes. By mid-morning, representatives from virtually every nation and faith tradition had arrived. The United Nations sent observers. Political leaders watched remotely, unsure how to respond to an event outside conventional diplomatic frameworks. Dr. Lewis, working with the Interfaith Council, had compiled a document outlining the prophetic parallels across traditions, what she termed the convergent prophecy. The document identified 7 key elements present in texts spanning diverse cultures and eras, all pointing to a moment of spiritual revelation centered in Jerusalem. The statistical probability of such textual convergence is effectively 0, she noted in her introduction. These writings, separated by centuries and continents, nonetheless describe the same sequence of events we are now witnessing. The cornerstone ceremony was scheduled for noon, when the sun would stand directly overhead. As preparations continued, a new phenomenon manifested. Water began flowing from the ancient Gihon spring with increased volume. Its mineral composition subtly altered to match descriptions in prophetic texts. Scientists confirmed that the water contained unusual healing properties. Doctors at Hadassah Hospital reported unprecedented recovery rates among patients who drank or were touched by this water. These reports spread rapidly, drawing medical researchers from around the world. "We're observing cellular regeneration patterns that defy current medical understanding," reported Dr. Miriam Khalidi, a leading oncologist who had abandoned a conference in Paris to witness the events. They don't want you to see what's really happening, but the truth can't stay hidden forever. As noon approached, the gathered crowd, now numbering in the hundreds of thousands, fell silent without prompting. The Interfaith Council proceeded to the prepared site, where the cornerstone rested on a simple wooden platform. Rabbi Ben David, representing Judaism, Father Thomas Malak, representing Christianity, Imam Ahmad Al-Fassi, representing Islam, along with representatives from Baha'i, Druze, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, and indigenous traditions worldwide, formed a circle around the stone. No words were spoken aloud, yet witnesses later reported hearing the ceremony in their native languages, another manifestation of the acoustic miracle that had begun days earlier. The stone, when touched simultaneously by the faith representatives, emitted a soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with the golden spiral overhead. Those present described a sensation of collective consciousness, a momentary awareness of connection to every other person present. In that moment, I could feel the hopes and fears of everyone around me, described Wei Lin, a philosophy professor from Beijing, not as intrusive thoughts, but as a shared human experience. The ceremony concluded with the stone being gently placed into a prepared hollow in the bedrock, not as a building foundation, but as a covenant marker, a testimony to what had been witnessed. As it settled into place, the spiral of light overhead intensified and expanded, forming a canopy visible from miles away. Satellite imagery captured the phenomenon, confounding meteorologists and physicists who struggled to classify it within known atmospheric events. What we're observing defies current models, admitted Dr. Jonathan Reeves of NASA's Atmospheric Science Division. The energy patterns suggest organization rather than randomness, intention rather than chance. The Interfaith Council released a joint declaration, carefully worded to respect all traditions while acknowledging the extraordinary nature of the events. We, representatives of humanity's diverse spiritual traditions, bear witness to phenomena that transcend our differences while fulfilling our shared prophecies. We do not claim exclusive interpretation, but acknowledge that what we are experiencing was foretold by our ancestors. We call for wisdom, humility, and openness as we walk together into what appears to be a new chapter of human spiritual history. Rabbi Ben David, speaking privately to Sarah that evening, reflected on the ancient texts that had guided his lifetime of study. The prophets never described the end as destruction, he said quietly. They described it as revelation, the removing of veils, the restoration of sight. She nodded. Not an ending at all, but a beginning. My friend, can you feel this in your spirit? The veil between heaven and earth is getting thinner. God is moving the pieces of the end times. What happened today stopped a city, but what's coming will stop the entire world. And when I tell you why all this is happening, you'll understand what's truly unfolding. The dawn of the fourth day broke with a new development. The golden light that had formed a spiral above Jerusalem now extended tendrils outward, like celestial rivers flowing to the horizons. Satellite imagery confirmed these extensions were reaching toward major cities worldwide: New York, Beijing, Cairo, Sydney, Moscow, Rio de Janeiro. People in these distant locations reported seeing a faint golden haze in their skies, moving with purpose rather than drifting with winds. Scientific instruments detected the same unique energy signature present in Jerusalem, though at lower intensity. The phenomenon was expanding globally. In Jerusalem, Rabbi Ben David and the Interfaith Council gathered before sunrise to witness this new development. Dr. Lewis brought ancient manuscripts showing prophetic references to rivers of light flowing from Zion to the nations. What we're seeing was described in texts across multiple traditions, she explained, pointing to passages from biblical prophets, Sufi mystics, and Eastern sages. They all speak of a revelation beginning in Jerusalem but extending to encompass the world. The cornerstone, now set in the bedrock, had developed a pulse synchronous with the global light network. Sensors placed by scientists recorded patterns that mathematicians recognized as prime number sequences, another sign of intelligence rather than random natural processes. By mid-morning, reports arrived from every continent of spontaneous gatherings. People felt drawn to open spaces, parks, and traditional sacred sites. Unlike the journey to Jerusalem, which required physical travel, this new phenomenon manifested as a collective awareness that transcended distance. "It's as if Jerusalem has become a spiritual epicenter," observed Father Malak. But the experience is no longer limited by geography. The mainstream media isn't covering the full extent of this. They don't want you to see what's really happening. Major news networks, after initially reporting on the mass gathering in Jerusalem, had shifted to more familiar political and economic stories. Their coverage frequently emphasized scientific investigations, seeking natural explanations, while minimizing the prophetic interpretations that resonated with billions worldwide. Yet the truth couldn't stay hidden. Social media platforms overflowed with personal testimonies. Ordinary people shared experiences of heightened awareness, spontaneous healing, and profound peace. These accounts crossed demographic boundaries, affecting people of all faiths, nationalities, educational backgrounds, and political persuasions. A statistician from MIT noted the impossibility of such consensus emerging naturally. "We're seeing agreement rates of over 90% among populations that typically disagree on everything. This defies every model of human behavior we've ever developed." By afternoon, Rabbi Ben David addressed the gathering in Jerusalem once more. His words, carried by the acoustic miracle, reached not only those physically present, but reportedly resonated with those participating in the global experience. "We stand at the threshold of what our ancestors foresaw," he began, "not the end of the world, but the beginning of understanding. Not destruction, but revelation." He quoted from Habakkuk 2:14, "For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." And from Revelation 21:3-4, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes." The continuity of prophecy was becoming clear not just to scholars, but to anyone witnessing the unfolding events. As Rabbi Ben David spoke, the golden light intensified globally. Those participating in distant gatherings reported seeing the same symbols that had appeared over Jerusalem, ancient sacred geometries now recognized across cultural boundaries. Dr. Lewis, continuing her research, discovered additional prophetic connections. "These texts aren't just parallel," she explained to the council. "They're complementary, each tradition holding pieces of a larger narrative that only makes sense when viewed together. The prophets saw thousands of years ago what is unfolding before our eyes." By evening, a new phenomenon emerged in Jerusalem. The waters flowing from the Gihon spring began to glow with the same golden light. Analysis showed the water remained chemically pure, but now carried properties that defied conventional physics, maintaining perfect temperature regardless of environment and appearing to increase in volume when shared. Reports of healing continued to multiply. Medical professionals documented cases that defied explanation. Terminal conditions reversed, chronic pain alleviated, psychological traumas resolved through what survivors described as memories transformed but not erased. The Interfaith Council, recognizing the historical significance, established a documentation center where testimonies could be recorded in multiple formats and languages. The goal was not to prove the supernatural nature of events, but to preserve the human experience of them. "Future generations will study what's happening now," noted Imam al-Farsi, "just as we studied the accounts of our ancestors. The cycle of revelation continues. As night fell on the fourth day, the golden network connecting Jerusalem to the world pulsed with increasing intensity. Astronomers reported unusual activity among celestial bodies, stars appearing to move in coordinated patterns, auroras manifesting at unprecedented global latitudes. Rabbi Ben David spent the evening in prayer with Sarah at their apartment overlooking the old city. "In all my studies," he confessed, "I never imagined I would live to see the prophecies fulfilled. I thought they were for a distant generation." She smiled, taking his weathered hand in hers. "Perhaps that's always been true, each generation thinking the revelation is for another time, another people, until it isn't," he finished. "My friend, can you feel this in your spirit? Do you realize we are witnessing what generations only dreamed of?" As the fifth day dawned, the golden light concentrated once more over Jerusalem. The global network remained, but the intensity focused on the ancient city where the cornerstone had been placed. Those gathered, now millions spread across the hills surrounding Jerusalem, waited in anticipation. The Interfaith Council assembled at the cornerstone site. Without planning or discussion, representatives of traditions that had often been in conflict throughout history stood together in perfect harmony. Their unity was not political or theological, but experiential, each recognizing in the others a shared encounter with something beyond their individual traditions. At precisely noon, as the sun reached its zenith, the golden light descended to touch the cornerstone. What happened in that moment was described differently by each witness, yet with remarkable consistency in essence. Some spoke of seeing figures from their faith traditions. Others described awareness of presence rather than visual manifestation. Scientists recorded energy patterns that organized into complex information systems. Linguists reported ancient languages becoming spontaneously comprehensible. The common element in all accounts was revelation, not as information alone, but as transformative understanding, knowledge that changed the knower. Rabbi Ben David, standing with the council, experienced what he would later describe as the veil being lifted, a moment when the connections between all things became visible, when history revealed its purpose, when the future opened with both certainty and freedom. The revelation lasted moments by chronological time, but was experienced as timeless by those present. When it concluded, the golden light did not vanish, but transformed, becoming subtler yet more pervasive, less visible yet more present. The cornerstone, examined afterward, had transformed physically. The limestone now contained veins of light that moved like living tissue. Scientific analysis found its molecular structure altered in ways that suggested it existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. In the days that followed, Jerusalem gradually returned to a form of normalcy, though profoundly changed. The pilgrims who had gathered began returning to their homes worldwide, carrying with them not just memories, but tangible transformation. The Interfaith Council, recognizing their role as witnesses rather than controllers, issued a final joint statement. What we have experienced transcends our capacity to fully articulate. We do not claim authority over its meaning, but testify to its reality. The prophecies foretold not an ending, but a beginning, not destruction, but renewal. As we return to our communities, we carry this revelation not as property to be guarded, but as light to be shared. Rabbi Ben David, interviewed by journalists as the gathering dispersed, smiled at their questions about what would happen next. "The prophets never gave us a complete map," he said gently. "But only enough light for the next step. We've witnessed the beginning. The continuation unfolds through how we live what we've seen." Dr. Lewis published her comparative analysis of prophecies, now expanded to include traditions from 6 continents. Her conclusion noted, "What we've witnessed appears to be not the completion of prophecy, but its continuation. Not the final chapter, but a turning point in an ongoing narrative." The Golden Network remained visible worldwide, though less dramatically than during the height of the revelation. Scientists continued studying its properties while acknowledging the limits of their methodologies to fully capture its nature. Communities globally reported lasting changes, reduced conflict, increased cooperation, renewed emphasis on values common across cultural boundaries. Political analysts noted unusual movement toward resolution of long-standing tensions, though challenges and disagreements remained. Sarah, walking with Rabbi Ben David through the old city as life resumed its rhythms, noticed the subtle golden light that now infused everything, visible to those who had experienced the revelation, but not imposing itself on those who hadn't. "It was always here, wasn't it?" she asked. "The light, the connection, we just couldn't see it." He nodded. The prophets weren't predicting something new. They were describing what is eternally true but temporarily hidden. She smiled. "And now we walk in what was revealed," he said, "until the next veil is lifted. Now that you know this, what will you do about it? While the world sleeps, God is calling those who are awake. What happened during those 5 days stopped a city, but what's coming will transform the entire world. Until then, stay ready, stay faithful, Maranatha."